Kia ora koutou. Ko Joan McCracken. I'm with the Alexander Turnbull Library's Outreach Services team, and it's my real pleasure to welcome you to Connecting to Collections online today. A little bit of housekeeping before I introduce today's speakers, Claire Butler and Paul Diamond. As you'll have seen when you joined the webinar, it is being recorded. And as this is a webinar, your videos and microphones are turned off. However, there's still an opportunity to interact with those of us in the room and with others in the audience. If you'd like to share where you're joining us from or have any general questions or comments, then please add those to chat. If you have any questions for Paul and Claire, then add those to Q&A. You'll find both buttons at the bottom of your Zoom screen. At the end of the presentation, I'll come back to ask our presenters any questions we receive. I am now delighted to introduce Paul Diamond, Ngāti Hawa, Tararoa, Ngāpuhi, Curator Māori with the Alexander Turnbull Library, and Claire Butler, Ngāti Kahununu ki Te Wairoa, who is Digitisation Advisor Māori with the National Library's Collaborative Services team. Kia ora kōrua.
Te oko ko te reo, te ihi o te reo, te iho o te reo, te oho o te reo. Tā rewa tū ki te rangi, e tau te Māori, hui e, tai ki e. E nā reo, e nā iwi, nā karangatanga maha, nā hapu katoa o Aotearoa, o runga, o raro, o Wainganui, o tēnei tai, o tērā tai, o te tua whenua katoa, nei rā te reo karanga kia koutou. Koutou, kua whakakao mai nei ki te are taringa mai ki e nei manu, e kawe ana i tēnei kaupapa o te puna mātauranga o Aotearoa. Ka whakaaro tō atu ki te hunga, kua taka ki tō te ārai. Haere koutou ki te kāpura, mutunga kore, e oki atura. Huri atu, huri mai ki a tātou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Ko Claire Butler tōku ingoa, he uri ahau no Airihi, no Ngāti Kurahikakawa o Pāhauera.
E te iwi, e mātakitaki mai nei, e whakarongo nei. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Paul Diamond tēnei, no Ngāti Haua, no Ngāpuhi, no Te Raroa, me Ngāti Pākehā. E mahi ana hau kei te wharepukapuka a Alexander Turnbull. Stored in the basement of the National Library building in Wellington is a collection of wrapped pieces of metal which saw service in the New Zealand Wars of the 19th century. The pieces, which were cast in London in 1862, make up a printing press used by the government to print a Māori language newspaper, Te Pihoihoi Mokemoke, or in full, it was called Te Pihoihoi Mokemoke I runga I te Tsuanui, a sparrow alone upon the housetop. The press, which was known as an Albion press, was held by the government printing office, which donated it to the Turnbull Library in 1958. In 1984, the library loaned the press to Te Aomutu Museum, where it was on display until 2014. Since then, it has been in storage at the Turnbull Library, where there are plans to reassemble it for display in the future.
Why was the paper printed by the press? Why was the paper printed by this press named after a bird? The reason for the bird title becomes clearer when you look at the first paragraph of the first issue. E taku hoa, ko wai rā nei koe te kai titiro I tēnei nūpepa nohi nohi. Ka waka au e hēngia, ai, he Hokioi ahau, e hara au te Hokioi, hore rawa, e rere ana tēnā manu ki runga riro mahue noiho te kapua, ko au ia, e rere kūpapa ana I te mato o te whenua. Ko taua manu e tangi tioro ana, he whai tohu, whakaatu I te pakanga I te whakahekenga toto, tēnā kuau, ka hore aku tangi tioro. Noho mokemoke ai au ki te tuanui o te whare, ko rihi kauai.
My friend, or whoever reads this small newspaper, make no mistake, for I am a Hokioi, but not their Hokioi, not at all. That bird flies high in the heavens beyond the clouds, while I fly close to the ground. That bird's screech is an omen, predicting warfare and bloodshed. I, on the other hand, do not screech. I sit alone on the rooftop, singing merrily. Te Hokioi was the title of another paper, Te Hokioi o New Tireni e Rere Atsuna, the first Māori language newspaper produced entirely by Māori. This was also named after a bird, the Hokioi, an extinct nocturnal bird also known as the New Zealand snipe. Now, as John Gorst, who produced the Pihoihoi Mokemoke, wrote, Te Hokioi was the spirit bird of ancient times. It was never seen, but its cry was known as an omen of war or disaster. The government choice of a different bird name, Te Pihoihoi, or the New Zealand pipit, was a sign of the rivalry between these two papers, which were printed during the conflict between Māori and the government. And the newspaper's title alludes to Psalm 102 from the Bible, verse 7, I watch and am as a sparrow alone upon the housetop. Both of these newspapers were digitized by Waikato University and can be seen on the National Library's Papers Past website. These new pepa, as they were known in Māori, are part of a collection of printed Māori known as Ngā Tānga Reo Māori, or books in Māori.
This collection of printed Māori was listed in a bibliography compiled by Phil Parkinson and Penny Griffith and published by the Alexander Turnbull Library in 2004. Phil and Penny listed detailed information about 1,565 Māori printed items, as well as 303 newspapers and periodicals. This was the printed Māori they were able to identify in the Turnbull Library and other collections from the start of printing in Māori in 1815 up until 1900.
The National Library has started to digitise some of the more than 1,500 items listed in Ngā Tānga Reo Māori and make them available in a new section on the Papers Past website. And we are 2 members of the team working on this project. So what you're looking at now is the shiny new Papers Past homepage, which has only just been launched today. This includes the first 107 items of printed Māori to be digitised. The mihi at the top of the page, Nau Mai Rahiri Mai, Ki Papers Past, welcomes users who are in search of the spark of knowledge. It reminds them to carefully uplift the knowledge into the world of light and use it wisely as a link from the past to the future. One of the many exciting changes in this website launch today is that you can now filter and search across all the different collections of content known in the library as buckets: newspapers, magazines and journals, letters and diaries, parliamentary papers and books, using the same search. And this is only the first phase of Papers Past redevelopments, and further changes will take place over the next year.
The new book section of Papers Past lets you narrow your search to just Ngā Tānga Reo Māori as a collection. This interface was developed with help from scholars who already use Papers Past website. Te Reo Māori has more of a presence within the website. The search boxes and section titles on the left-hand side have been translated. A language switcher, which enables you to switch between Te Reo and English, has also been added. An overview of the books in Māori kaupapa titled He aha Ngā Tānga Reo Māori above the Tātari heading has also been added to give users background information about the collection. Finally, the Niho Taniwha design has been added, reminding users of the concept of transmission of mātauranga and storytelling. Today, Paul and I are going to show you some of Ngā Tānga Reo Māori to illustrate the kinds of things you can find in the collection. We'll look at who produced the items, why they were produced, and what they tell us, both about Te Reo Māori as well as the wider history of Aotearoa.
Now, as Claire mentioned earlier, the first item printed in Māori appeared in 1815. This was a Māori language grammar printed in Sydney, a Korao no New Zealand, or the New Zealanders' first book. The one copy of this book known to have survived is held by Auckland War Memorial Museum, Tama-Ki-Hikurangi, and you can see a digital copy on their website.
The grammar, like others in this collection, has sample sentences. These give an idea of what was going on in the world of early contact between Māori and European. Line 1 in section 45 is a translation of the English sentence, "What man gave that fish hook to thee?" Written, as you can see, in the English of 1815. We'd now translate this as, "Nā wai te tangata I ho mai tērā mātou kia koe." What you can see on the left-hand side of the page is a very early attempt to write down Te Reo Māori.
The Korao no New Zealand is credited as being written by a missionary called Thomas Kendall, but the story of its creation goes back to Tūai, a Ngāre Raumati rangatira from the northern part of Aotearoa. Tuai travelled to Parramatta in Australia in 1813 and lived with Samuel Marsden, the Anglican missionary, and other northern Māori at the Christian mission station in New South Wales. Tuai, on the left of the slide, taught Samuel Marsden and his fellow missionary Thomas Kendall the northern Māori language, helping Kendall prepare for the first book using the Māori language. Kendall had struggled to assemble the work, which was written after he had spent less than a year in Aotearoa, and his lack of linguistic training also made things harder. In 1817, Samuel Marsden made arrangements for Tuai and another Ngā Reo relation, Titiri from Rangihauwa in Northland, to go to England and assist Kendall to produce a Māori language grammar. Tuai and Titiri spent time with Samuel Lee, a language expert at Cambridge University, to form a complete grammar and vocabulary of the New Zealand language. Now, unfortunately, both Tuai and Titiri fell seriously ill and needed to return back to Aotearoa. Samuel Lee realised that significant work still needed to be done before the work was publishable. In 1820, Chiefs Hongi Hika and Waikato, both from the northern tribes of Ngāpuhi, travelled to Cambridge in England with Kendall to assist in compiling the first Māori grammar and vocabulary book. That same year, James Barry, who painted the portraits of Tuai and Titiri, also painted this image, with Waikato on the left, Hongi in the centre, and Thomas Kendall seated on the right.
Books such as the Korao were needed because the missionaries who arrived in Aotearoa had decided to try to convert the New Zealanders, as Māori were then known, in their own language. In order to convert Māori, the language needed to be converted into written form. This is a lantern slide, a painted image on glass, which will be viewed through a projector. The slide shows Māori schoolboys writing a letter marking the Jubilee of the Church Missionary Society, the Anglican church group which began its work in Aotearoa in 1814.
But it was another early missionary group in Aotearoa, the Wesleyans, or Methodists, who printed the earliest item included in the New Book section on Papers Past. This translation of some of the book of Genesis from the Old Testament of the Bible appeared in 1837 and was printed by the Wesleyan Mission Press in Mangungu in the Hokianga.
It's interesting to compare the early translation, which is listed as number 32 in Books in Māori, or BIM 32 for short, with the 1868 translation of the same text. Looking first at the first verse of the first chapter of Genesis, or Kenehi, in English this reads, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth." The text was translated in 1837 as, "I te oroko mea tanga I hanga e te atua te rangi me te wenua." In 1868, the same verse was translated differently as, "He mea hanga na te atua I te timatanga te rangi me te whenua." BIM 32, the 1837 text uses orokohanga, which means origin, beginning, creation, or advent. The word is also used in the title, Ko te orokohanga I te ao. Also note the use of wenua instead of whenua. Initially, Māori words we now spell with, such as whenua, did not have the H. Another example is verse 3, another well-known line from Genesis. In English, this reads, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." BIM 32 in 1837 translated this as, "Mea ana te atua kia marama a kua marama." Then in 1868, this became, "A ka ki te atua kia marama na ka marama." These examples illustrate how you can use the text in these digitized documents to trace changes in te reo Māori over time.
The extracts from the Book of Genesis Claire's shown you now were produced to teach Māori how to read, as well as for religious instruction. But as well as scriptures, missionaries were producing language learning material like this. This is a Māori language primer, a first textbook to teach reading, also printed by the Wesleyan Mission at Mangungu. This was printed by a man called William Woon in 1836. And what you're looking at is Woon's own copy with his own annotations written on it. So if you read those annotations on the right-hand side from the top, Woon has written Book of the NZ Language, WW, has initials for William Woon, alphabet, figures, numerals, and syllables.
The work produced by Woon and other missionaries can support research into tribal mita and dialects. As well as being stationed at Mangungu Mission Station in the north, Woon also spent time in Kawhia and Taranaki district, where he was exposed to different tribal dialects. These dialects were also observed by another missionary, Robert Maunsell, as he traveled the country. Maunsell, who also produced a grammar book, was more familiar with the Waikato dialect. The Korao, produced by Kendall, was influenced by the Ngāpuhi dialect. In 1841, Woon printed a Māori language reader titled He Puka Ako I Te Kōrero Māori, Lesson Book in the Southern Māori. This was written by James Watkin, a Wesleyan missionary who was invited to the region of Waikouaiti by Karetai and Taiaroa, two Otako chiefs. Watkins noted the dialectal variations from the north to that of the south. These two chiefs, Karetai and Taiaroa, desired schools for their children in order that they might read and write like the Māori children of the North Island. Armed with supplies printed by missionaries in the Bay of Islands, James Watkins soon discovered they were of little use as the dialect spoken in the south was so different. This language reader, He Puka Ako I Te Kōrero Māori, has particular significance as it is in Kaitahu Māori dialect and will be included in a future installment of material on the Papers Past website. Around the same time as William Woon printed the primer, this humble little exercise book was being filled with writing for another missionary at Mangungu, James Buller.
This is a lexicon or a word list to help with learning the New Zealand language. The lexicon, which records 920 words with their meanings, was purchased in 2014 by the Turnbull Library and has been digitized. You can see words that are familiar to us, such as aroha on line 9, but also less familiar words such as atawainga on line 12, formed using atawhai as we know it today, but without an H to mean kindness. The words in the lexicon can be compared with those in printed Māori, which is a good reminder of how Ngā Tānga Reo Māori can connect with manuscripts and other types of collections.
The Ngā Tānga Reo Māori collection includes Māori printed material produced by other faiths. Some of these missionaries use languages other than English. For example, Catholic missionaries who were in Aotearoa from 1838. People may have visited Pompelia House in Russell, or Kororarika as it was known. This is where the first book from the Catholic mission, led by Bishop Jean-Baptiste Francois Pompelia, was printed in 1839. In 1849, Pompelia wrote a book in French which taught basic grammar and vocabulary in Te Reo Māori. All of the explanations were in French, written for the Marist order to aid learning the language of the New Zealand people. What you can see here is one of the coloured pages from a Catholic devotional work printed later in 1897. This was from a different Catholic mission in Otaki and was thought to have been compiled by Father Delache, also known as Francois de la Chienne. The text at the bottom, E tō mātou matua I te rangi, is the first line of the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven. And the phrase at the top, Ngā tō whaia, can be translated as from your fire, a reference to Mary.
Lutheran missionaries from Germany established a church in Martin in 1876. And just 1 year later, William Corvett and J.F. Gerstling produced this school primer with stories in Lutheran Catechism, which is a summary of religious beliefs. And this page is from the section of the book with reading lessons. When you look at the words, you can see German words, including Deutsch, for German on the 8th line, and Flasche, the word for bottle, a bottle, at the top of the bottom section, mixed in together with Māori and English words. And the book also includes 6 pages of hymns. And when you look at the first page of this section with the hymns, there's a hymn by Luther, From Himmel hoch da komm ich her, from heaven above to earth I come, is used by the number 2 there to indicate the tune of the hymn text, which is actually a completely different hymn written in Māori, but obviously sung to the tune of a famous German Christmas hymn written by Luther.
Missionaries were not the only group of Pākehā producing printed Māori material. In 1842, Edward Jerningham Wakefield, son of Edward Gibbon Wakefield, arranged for several hundred copies of this notice to be printed. Addressed to all Māori, ki ngā Māori katoa, the notice was related to Wakefield's belief that Māori should produce muka, flax fibre. The notice says that the price for a large basket of muka is 6 shillings. E ono ngā herengi e utu ki poneke mo tetahi ke te muka. It's interesting to see the use of transliterations or loan words, something you will see in Ngā Tānga Reo Māori. For example, herengi for shilling and poneke for Wellington or Port Nicholson, and tiraweke, saddleback, now known as tieke, which was Wakefield's Māori nickname. When we think about muka now, it's usually in connection with weaving, but it was a big part of the economy in 1842. Other notices in Māori tell us about different things going on within the economy.
For example, this notice printed in Nelson or Wakatu in 1844, urging Māori to grow wheat or wheatie.
As the text at the top explains, this was not only a healthy food, he paenga mo te tinana, but wheat grown for food could be sold. Wakatupu i te wheatie, hei wheatie kai, hei wheatie hoko, and used to buy things like clothing.
And the bottom part of the text explains how wheat growing happens between January and May, but in June, Māori should, according to this little poster, be thinking about sheep farming. The wool from sheep can be used to make woolen clothing. And if you look at the fourth line on the section headed Kohune, you can see mo te paraukete nui kia rua hipi, 2 sheep for 1 blanket. And as the notice goes on to explain, there are no end of things that can be made from wool. Te oti te taraukete, trousers, te hakete, jacket, te kaone, gown, tiaha, and so on, I te huruhuru o te hipi, from sheep's wool.
The same year as the notice about wheat appeared, 1844, the first Māori dictionary was produced by Reverend, later Bishop, William Williams. At this time, an apostrophe was used in front of the W as a F sound. The book marked the start of an incredible family dynasty of dictionary production. William Williams produced the second edition, in which he started to use the W and H to represent the F sound within the dictionary. His son, Bishop William Leonard Williams, produced the third and fourth editions. Then his son, Herbert William Williams, produced the fifth edition, published in 1917. This was used as the basis for the 6th edition and finally the 7th edition, which language learners use today.
As well as being the grandson of William Williams, on the left on this slide, Herbert Williams was an advisor to Alexander Turnbull about his own Māori collections. Herbert Williams was a skilled Māori linguist and in 1924 produced a bibliography of printed Māori to 1900. And it's this book that Ngā Tānga Reo Māori, Books in Māori, followed on from.
Going back to the first Williams dictionary by Herbert Williams' grandfather, this looked a bit different to the dictionaries we are familiar with today. It had a grammar listing the singular, dual, and plural forms of Māori still used today.
The first Māori dictionary also had a section headed a selection of colloquial sentences. Now, this starts at the top with no hea koe, or where are you from, which would be familiar to learners of Māori today, but there are other sentences which would be less familiar, such as ko waito mihingari, who is your missionary? These sentences are really interesting as a window into the world of Māori missionary interactions in 1844, and you'll see there that someone, perhaps the owner of this dictionary, has added their own sentences at the top of the page.
Together with Missionaries, the government was the other major producer of printed Māori in Ngā Tānga Reo Māori. This poster from 1861 is offering a reward of £300 for information leading to the conviction of anyone who had helped Māori obtain gunpowder, paura, or other munitions, mea whawhai. The poster has used utu as the word for reward.
And as many people will be aware, the 1860s were a time of conflict between the government and Māori. This was when Te Ua Haumene founded a church called Hokioi, named after the Ho, or breath of God, which carried news of deliverance to his followers. Between 1864 and 1867, Ho followers were drawn into armed conflict with government forces and loyal Māori soldiers. And one of these conflicts happened in 1865 at Puke Pa in Tiki on the Waiapu River. News that the pa had been captured was too late for the Māori language newspaper, Te Waka Māori o Ahuriri, so the paper printed this small notice as a supplement, and the notice also mentions that 550 Māori prisoners were being brought to Napier. According to the Books and Māori publication, this is the only known copy of this item, and I'm mentioning this because it highlights that as well as providing access to this collection and the language within it, digitizing these items also plays a role in preserving them for the future.
The conflict with the Ho Paul mentioned also featured in this government publication called Ko Te Kahiti o New Tirini. This was a Māori language version of the New Zealand Gazette, which was used for official government notices. The pānui at the bottom of the page is offering reward of £100 for information about the murder of a police officer on the 21st September 1865. Ko Te Kahiti o New Tirini was published from 1865 to 1931. The first part, up until 1900, has been digitized and is available on papers past. Ahakoa he iti he paunamu. As we've explained, much of the printed material in Ngā Tānga Reo Māori was produced by churches and the government. There are, however, some items produced by Māori. Some of these are to do with hui and events, such as this invitation to a gathering at Awamate. This is the text at the top. He pānuitanga ki ngā iwi, ki ngā hapu, ki ngā reo, ki ngā hui ngā tangata, ki ngā rangatiratanga I roto I te rohe pōti o te tairawhiti. Tēnā koutou katoa I roto I te aroha o tō tātou ariki. He pōwhiri atu tēnei I a koutou, katoa, katoa, katoa. Kia haere mai ki te awamate, wāhi o te mahia, a te rua tekau mā whā o Tihema 1897. E haere ake nei, ki te whakamahara I te rā I whānau ai tō tātou ariki, e karangatia nei tauara ko te rā o te krihimete. Nā o koutou hoa nā epanaia whānga, awamate, akuhata, rua tekau mā toru, 1897. This is an invitation dated 8th of July, 1897 to a Christmas gathering at Awamate near Wairua, Hawke's Bay, signed by Epanaia Whānga and 19 other tipuna from Nuhaka. This invitation was printed in 1897 by H.W. Williams at Te Rau Press, Gisborne. That's the same Herbert Williams we were talking about earlier, who was a printer as well as a linguist. As you can see, the document makes extensive use of ornaments and decorative typefaces, one reason this writing appeals to me. As well as being beautiful, these examples of writing are a great way to learn te reo. You can utilize the structures and change the context to apply and make it applicable for different kaupapa.
Here's another poster. This is thought to have been printed in 1887 and was about a horse called Clansman, or Karanimana in Māori. He tari ono tino pai, he uri no ngā tino hoiho pairawa o mua, a very fine stallion with an outstanding pedigree, 9 years old and 16 and a half hands high. And at the end of a very extensive explanation of Clansman's illustrious whakapapa, the poster tells readers they can approach the owner, Mr. Korao, or Te Kerehama at Puketapu.
We thought we'd finish our talk with a couple of our favorites. I have many favorites, but one that I'm fond of has a lot to do with these two people. Renata Tama-Ki-Hikurangi Kawepō was a ngai te upokoiri, ngā tihine manu, ngā te kahungunu leader and missionary. During the land wars, ngā puhi took Kawepō to Nukutaurua, where he remained with them for more than 10 years. In 1837, he was taken to the Bay of Islands and lived at Waimate North for several years. Whilst there, he was converted to Christianity and baptized Renata, Leonard, One of the missionaries Renata Kawepō worked with was the man on the right, William Calenso. Calenso began his missionary work for the Church Missionary Society in Hawke's Bay. This is a list of 158 Māori who had given up smoking in 1847-1848, headed by Renata Kawepō and arranged by area. 72 puna signed from Here Taonga, 1 from Manawatu, 27 from the Takutai, East Coast, and 60 from Wairarapa. Ko te hunga tēnei o Here Taonga, o te Takutai anga atu whakarunga puta noa ki tūrakirai, o Wairarapa, o hea. Ka mahue a rātou te kai tūpeka I nei tau 1847-1848. No Here Taonga I nei, Renata Kawepō noa huke apira hama Poa, no Waitangi Here Taonga, I taia ki te perehi a te kore niho, printed at Waitangi Mission Station Press, Hawke's Bay in 1848. The mission station stood not far from the current Star Compass at Clyde. I love this writing because it's a reminder that our tupuna took control of their lives and of their hauora. They pledged as a rōpū and would have had support and tautoko from each other to stop smoking. This writing shows the priorities of the tupuna of those days. I showed this writing to a Korao from Ngā Tānga and he saw the name of his tupuna fire, and with a giggle he said, "Oh Nan, thank you for showing me the way. I'm not sure if he's still smoking, but there's definite inspiration to be drawn from this writing." Another interesting book written in te reo by Calenso and printed by the government press was Ko te ā nui a wi. Hei ako mana ki te reo ingarihi, Willie's first English book, written for young Māori who can read their own Māori tongue and who wish to learn English language. Printed in 1872, this book highlights that teaching Māori English was a concern of the missionaries and the government of that era.
And the images we've got on the slide there were actually put on the internet by MTG in Hawke's Bay. And that's just to acknowledge that we aren't the only institution that's been digitising this material. We showed you images from Auckland Museum, and other institutions in New Zealand and overseas actually have been digitising the material in the Books in Māori collection. Now, when it came to thinking of one of my favourites, I can never go past this one, which is a poster, and this is printed on 2 sides. Technically, it's called a handbill, apparently, but it's from when the champion Herculean wrestler and weightlifter Dr. John Theo Hatzopulos visited New Zealand in 1899. His Gisborne appearance was promoted in Māori as well as English. Hatzopulos claimed to be able to allow 2 persons selected haphazard from the audience to break with sledgehammers a stone weighing 200 pounds resting on his bare head. He was known as Professor Greek George, Kiriki Hori in the poster's Māori version. This is another illustration of how words are transliterated into Māori, well, how they used to be transliterated into Māori, creating loan words using the Māori alphabet, which, as people know, has fewer characters than English.
Our last image is this beautiful Māori alphabet printed in 1833.
And we're going to finish with a quote from a colleague and friend of ours that we've been struck by since we first saw it, really, the legal scholar from Victoria University, Māmiri Stevens, who wrote that these early publications we've shown you today illustrate how Māori was a language of civil engagement and discourse, and they're an inspiration for how this could happen again. The collection of Māori language material has also been described as arguably the largest of any Indigenous language in the world. We're excited about the potential for these printed taonga to be a resource for researchers, students, and those interested in language revitalisation.
Kia ora ai te reo. Ko te reo te Māori o te mana Māori, ko te kupu te Māori o te reo Māori. E rua e nei wehenga kōrero e hāngai tonu ana ki rungi te reo Māori, ko te reo no te atua mai. Nā tā he mihinari. Before we wrap up, I'd like to touch on the consultation process which had taken place within this pilot project. We had contacted all of the various churches, and their responses been very welcoming and enthusiastic about the project about the kaupapa, Ngā Tānga Reo Māori. And we've also been very fortunate to be in contact with descendants of those who produced this printed material. This has been very special, as in some instances, the whānau had no knowledge that their tupuna had written material, and this project has reconnected descendants with these writings. The various iwi runanga have also been very helpful in putting me in contact with descendants, and also in regards to seeking consent. We have acknowledged the whānau or iwi who have helped with the consent process within the acknowledgement section for each piece of writing. In closing, we must mention our work colleagues who have utilised their pukinga, their skills, their contacts within this project to ensure it is a success. E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi, e ngari taku toa he toa takitini.
Tika tai. Nō reira tātou mā. Ko tai ki te pito whakamutunga o tēnei kawenga kōrero e pāna ki Ngā Tānga Reo Māori. I roto I ngā kupu a ngā pakake o te Wairoa, e ki ana ngā kupu o te mauhanga kōrero BIM 1499. Kia pai here a tātou, hei pai here kotahi I roto I te aroha. Kia ora.
Ngā mihi, Claire and Paul. Thank you so much for such a fascinating presentation. We do have some comments and pātai to share with you. I'm going to start though with one from me, and one we were discussing a little earlier. In the slide that we've got up at the moment, the NG looks rather odd. Would you like to say a little something about that, or what you know about it?
Well, again, you know, the first thing I do when I have this sort of question is I turn to the book, to BIM, and there's very little is known about this item. It's not even completely certain exactly when it was printed. It's thought to be from that year in the 1830s. But what it is this digraph. That's a combination of two letters representing one sound. So that's what the missionaries identified, that there was this WH, there was this NG, and they're not just the same as those two words combined. They have a different sound, as we know, in Māori. Now, maybe this was unfamiliar to the printer, and that, you know, printers wouldn't have been used to printing this, and perhaps they were just trying to signal that it is different. That's why they printed it the odd way that they have. But you see, the beauty of what's happened today with this material going online is that there could well be people in the world who've got a bit more knowledge about this, and it makes it easier for people to see this material and get in touch with the library with their own whakaaro. So who knows? I think there could well be more information to emerge about these.
Kia ora. In our questions, we have one from Waitangi Tepa. Do you know if there's an extensive list of all English Māori names, common first names and surnames, transliterations that you know of? Makarini from Maclean, Omana, Ormond. I know that Taiuru has one for the most common translation of names. Are there others from our taonga tuku iho keish?
That's a good question, because I think there have been attempts actually at the back of this edition of the Williams Dictionary, which is still the one that we all use, the one we mentioned, the 7th edition. There is a list. A book that we use a lot, Te Aka, I think it's called, John Moorfield produced this, a dictionary of loanwords. That has a lot of them. That has things like makarini and things. But I think actually there's a lot of scope to, and now that you see with this material being on papers past, it means people can kind of collate that much more easily now. They can just, these are sort of data sets. So Waitangi, you're right. We could sort of build on the work of these other dictionaries. And another thing to mention is that as of today, this is one of the books that's also gone onto that interface on papers past. It was there, but as a PDF, that every time I downloaded it, it almost blew up my machine because it was so big. So now you can actually access the parts of that book that you want to, and you can do word searches. You know, what did Calenso produce? I mean, this book was so well done, and it's got a beautiful index, but this sort of opens up other possibilities. So yeah, I think those are great sort of projects for students and things to think about working on.
Kia ora. Some wonderful comments in the chat. I'm not going to attempt to read them all out to you we will save the chat for you for later. Another question that we had was about how many books in Māori are going to be on the website from today?
Okay, so going live today, there are going to be 107. And there's many more, I think 700 to come in the next 2 years. So it's quite a lot of awesome readings for you whānau. So me ruku I te puna mātauranga o Aotearoa.
And remember, that's in addition to what's already there with the new paper. So the great bulk of the new paper collection is already there, and that began with the work that Waikato University did. They were the first to digitize the sets of microfilm material. So that's there, and also things like Ko Te Kahiti, that's part of the magazine and periodical section. So there's already that material there as well. So today you've got the other material that wasn't a newspaper or a magazine starting to come on the first instalment.
Thank you both for that. Melissa Bryant is asking a question too. In time, will there be an option to browse the subjects? I tried a few ways to search by subject and finally realized I had to use English. But without seeing what the options were, I was still flying a wee bit blind. Is that a question that you can answer, or have we got an answer from Emerson? Oh, Emerson's raised his hand. I understand that. Is that can we turn him on? As it were?
Yeah.
Kia ora kōrua. Kia ora
Kia
koutou.
ora, Emerson, can you answer that question for us?
Yeah, I can. We've drawn the subject metadata from the catalogue, and we can really just surface up the subject headings that are there because there are so many of them. I don't know how many.
We can't hear you. Celia, have you unmuted him? We've got a cast of thousands here, people.
We can hear Emerson, you just can't.
You can hear me okay? Long story short, we have so many subjects that we can't provide a full list to browse. You'd have a page that you'd be scrolling down for hours. We had to provide a way to browse the subjects that was, unfortunately, just you type in a subject that you're looking for and it starts to match words that match that. So if you have a think about a subject you're interested in, start typing letters and look at the other subjects that populate on the list that appears. That's really the best we could do with handling the subject data. We're looking at bringing in some refinements to it, but we don't have the final answers to it yet. But what's in place now is a good first crack at it.
Hi, Emerson. Because I couldn't hear your response, because we've got our sound turned off here, I wonder if you've also had an opportunity to look at Gerald Jones's question, also in the Q&A. Mel?
Let me just. Kia ora koutou. In terms of Gerald Jones's question, so the OCR, our vendor does that automatically. It's not corrected for accuracy. So that is going to be interesting. We'll see how it goes. We correct headlines, we correct tables of contents, we correct authors' names, but we don't correct the bulk of the text. In terms of your second question, I think Claire talked a bit about that in terms of how we're trying to involve the Māori community in the digitisation of these materials.
How does the Māori community participate in the digitisation of these materials? Tēnā koe. So first of all, I make contact with whānau with a total effort to get to whānau if that's possible. I go through runanga, different networks, to try and reach out to descendants of the people who have written these documents. So that's one way that we're reaching out to whānau. We've had some real success with certain writings. I'm thinking of one in particular where the hapu decided they'd like to put it into the hapu newsletter, and show others, show the descendants. So that's a really awesome way to get the message out to many people.
And as Claire mentioned, you know, we got from every single faith we contacted, they were really, really enthusiastic. And we're now in touch with the archives, the archivists, and of course, they're all conscious of the need to preserve these taonga as well. And quite a lot of the faiths are already thinking of how to digitize some of their material. And remember that books in Māori only went up to 1900. So there's, of course, Māori language material kept being printed after that. So there's that whole other set of material that we need to be conscious of as well. So yeah, it's a hugely rich resource there, but this is just an exciting day to just have this first 107 items coming online.
Kapai. And just to add, whānau hapu iwi that I've been in contact with are really very excited about how they don't have to come to the library physically. They can research from home. In fact, you don't even need to be in Aotearoa. You can do it global. So it just opens things up to everybody, which again is about connecting uri to these writings.
And there are examples of books in Māori and overseas. The National Library of Australia in Canberra has got some of the only copies of some of the items of in this collection. And there's even some in Austria. The two Māori men who went to Austria and worked in the printery of the emperor, and they brought back that press that produced the Hokioi, they printed a special address to the emperor before they left, and that's in German and in Māori, and the only copy of that's in Austria. And that would be wonderful to have that digitized, and so that's part of this sort of set of material that people can access, as Claire says, from wherever you are.
A number of people have mentioned, well, Emerson for a start, that there is other Māori material on Papers Past, including Mary Pepper, but I wondered if, Paul, you'd like to say a little bit about the Donald Maclean papers as well, because that's another fantastic resource for Reo Māori.
That's right, and that's one of the sets of material, manuscripts material. At the moment, the only collection there is the Makareni Donald Maclean letters in Māori. But that's hugely significant because I understand that that's the largest set of Māori language letters that the Turnbull has. It might be the largest in the country, actually. So that was also transcribed and translated. Well, they're working translations by a team of translators that were led by Jane McRae and Ngāpare Hopa and others. And that's an amazing resource because we have a lot of history students, and I mean, anybody can access that. They don't actually need to be fluent in Māori. That's a corpus they can access. And I've got other collections I've got my eyes on as well that I'd quite like to build that up. And of course, when it's on Papers Past, it means it's text searchable because these same letters are in Tiaki and the National Library website, our other platforms, but you can open the Word documents and things, but being on Papers Past, it's designed to help you search it as a group of text. So we'd always like to hear if there are collections that people think we could consider for that. We're aware there's a lot of collections here that are on microfilm. Microfilm's getting a little bit difficult to use because even if we could get that microfilm to you, your local library might not have a reader anymore. We really need to be thinking about either digitizing the microfilms or going back to the original letters and digitizing those. So there's a lot of work to do.
I think, Claire, that you mentioned that there are another 700 at least to go onto this website in time. Is this project another year, another 2 years? Do you have a feel for how long it's going to take?
So, like anything, there's no definite time frame because it all depends on creating relationships, nurturing relationships. That's one part of the project. But we are looking at another 700 writings to go on Papers Past within the next two years. So we'll definitely watch this space.
And I think how this plays out will have a lot to do with the feedback we get from the community. So that's what we're really keen is to not just the audience who've tuned in today, but all of the people in your networks. And we do have this kind of core group of people that have been involved with this from the start, and we're sort of working outwards from there, because I think there is just scope for lots of connections. People who are interested in their own whānau history, historians, but also the language revitalization community, and we're having some great conversations with them. We're talking to people who are looking at using data sets and can see the potential of this as sets of data that, even though it's giving you snapshots of Māori at different times, it can be used to help us do things like generate a Māori version of Siri, which is one project that's underway in the country at the moment. So it'd be really exciting if this historical material could be helping us with the future of our language. So I think that's a big message from us both, and on behalf of the rest of the team, is that we're really, really keen to get the feedback. And now, as of today, people can do their own tutoring and start to explore this set and give us their feedback.
Thank you, Paul. There is one last question, and it's quite a complex one, so perhaps it's a great way to finish. Thanks, Prayesh. He asks, what are some of the challenges that the team faced for this kaupapa, especially in relation to Te Ao Māori and tikanga? Claire's mentioned that there have been in-depth consultation with hapu whānau, but are there any other tikanga that was carefully considered?
I guess each writing, each document has their own context. He rereke ia tuhinga, ia mauhanga kōrero, no reira ka whai whakaaro ki tērā, kina āhuatanga o tērā tuhinga. Ko te mea nui kia mātou, pēnā kāre te whānau e whakai, kāre mātou e whakairi I rungi te pai tukutuku. If the family, for whatever reasons, we're not there to judge their reasons, if they don't allow it, it will not go on online. Nō reira, I te mutunga te rā kia rātou te kōwhiringa whakamutunga, ko tā mātou, he whakātu, he whāriki I te kaupapa. So that's one way that we are definitely bringing their considerations into account. If the whānau don't want it to go online, it won't go online. But in terms of tikanga,
we've sort of been exploring. Each time this has come up, it's sort of given us new challenges. And I think Mel had some feedback. This is you're hearing Melanie Lovell-Smith, who's part of the project team.
Yes.
I just put in the chat, one of the practices we've developed talking with Claire and Paul and Dale and so on within the library is once the items are captured, we send the digital images off to be OCR'd, and what we're doing is saying a karakia of protection over the hard drive before it leaves the library, and we've got a little welcome back ceremony as well when the data comes back and before it's copied over onto the servers and stuff.
Yeah, we're very lucky. As we said, we're just you're only seeing two people of a much bigger team, and then there's also people across the library that have supported this kaupapa as well. The other point I'd say in terms of my role with this material is that it's really, really important to give people context, because I don't claim to understand everything about the items we've shown you today, but you do your best to try and put it in its historical context. Just like we'd hope that people who were looking at things that we wrote in 2021, that they saw in another 100 years, we're sort of seeing it and trying to understand the world that we're living in and what we're going through at the moment. So I think that really helps as well. And that's what I'm also keen for the groups that Claire's making contacts with. But thank you for the question and all of the feedback.
And just want to pay special mention because I see a name on here.
Tēnā koe matua Frank Vaughan. And so it's been the power of the kumara vine, to be able to get to whānau has been really, really, really special, because that's where it's at for me. And a lot of networks and people out there in the community have really helped this process. So nui te mihi ki a koutou, kua tautoko nei tēnei kaupapa.
Kia ora, Paul and Claire. Thank you to everyone who's joined in today and to all of you who've asked questions and put your comments in chat. We'll make sure that all of you get to see that. When you leave the session today, you should receive a short survey, just one question. We would appreciate it if you have time to respond. If you want to revisit this presentation, and this is a question we have had already, or you want to share it with friends and colleagues, it will be available in a few weeks on the National Library website. If you'd like to hear about future events being held at the library, on-site or online, and you're not already on our What's On mailing list, please do sign up. You can subscribe on the events page on the National Library website. Celia has added our address to chat. On your screens now is a photo of a recent publication, Te Kupinga. This includes 101 stories from the collections of the Turnbull Library, including articles by today's speaker, Paul Diamond. The book is published by Massey University Press and is available from the sponsors, the Turnbull Endowment Trust, their address is on the slide, and many bookshops. Make a marvellous Christmas present. Before we finish today, I just want to add my congratulations to the Papers Past team for making this amazing resource available to us all in Aotearoa and around the world. And we look forward to the next time you can join us. Ka kite anō.
Karakia whakamutunga. Kia hikina tēnei ki te kōrero ki te tāhuhu o te whare. Kia tā rewa tēnei Māori te kaupapa nei. Hui e, tai ki e.
Kia ora.